And so this
But
goes into
anyways,
why do they want to put stuff here because land's cheap, but then it's also really hot here too. So during the summer,
exactly.
I suspect water and power draws are going to be even higher if
Yes,
they
and
put
that would
data
be a
centers
safe
out
assessment.
here.
That would be a safe assessment for it because, and then they're also going to have to deal with the humidity because, best I remember, electronics don't deal with humidity too well.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the new Alabamian. I'm Trent Ford, and today I have with me my friend Ethan. So he's been on before, and his background is he went to Auburn for wildlife and ecology management. He's been doing natural resource work ever since. He's even been down to Florida for a little bit before he came back to Alabama, and I've known him for years, even before he left.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else I
That's
need to
right.
add?
No, that's about it. If anything else comes up, I will be sure to toss that in there. I know that I think you were talking about we're going to be talking about Tommy Tuberville tonight. I was at the university before he managed to single-handedly increase the tuition by 14%. So I have opinions.
He's alluding to the fact that we're going to cover data centers, and for whatever reason, Tommy Tuberville has decided that data centers are only Chinese propaganda if you don't want them, which we'll cover too. So our big takeaways on this are is we're going to talk about data centers and like what are they to understand, and like I'm probably going to go on a rant about them, and Ethan's going to provide some other information too where he can chime in.
And I'll probably play devil's advocate a few times here. Not, I'll be sure to throw in what I actually believe and the arguments that I've heard on the other side of things. Just trying to balance out, make sure y'all have a something of a balanced opinion to take away here. You know, although that being said, I am just going to go and put it out here. I think that the implementation, the way that we are building them right now, is the biggest problem we have.
I'll agree that's the
So
biggest problem, and like I'm some people are completely against it. I'm not a teetotaler on almost anything, but on data farms, I just think we're doing it wrong. And I've talked with Ethan about this before, but one of the things that we need to do is have proper siting and zoning standards. But a bigger
or
problem is the misunderstanding of how people don't know, like that there's actually three different kinds of data centers. Sorry, Ethan, you can go ahead.
I was going to say, or just the enforcement of the standards we have, because we already have zoning and environmental enforcement standards for how these things need to be built, where they need to be built at. We already have areas that are supposed to be built in. So just enforcing the rules we have is the first line of defense, and they're hand waving a lot of those restrictions at the federal level, and the states are just following suit. Because in case y'all aren't aware, there's two different layers to environmental permits. We had to build something large, like any kind of factory or data center. You have the state level and you have the federal level. The federal level is where the EPA is at. Then you have groups like in Alabama, ADEM, where they're supposed to step in also. So go ahead. I just want to toss that in there.
Here, no, that's a good point. So some people know that I'm running for Alabama State House. So a lot of the stuff I talk about is what can we do at the state level, because getting the federal government to do anything is basically like you can't. You just have to hope every 4 years that they're going to cooperate, and right now they're not. So I have to look at things what we can do at the Alabama level. I'm going to see if I can share my little table that I put together to help explain like what are the three types of data centers. And for those who don't know, there are regular web data centers. Sometimes they're called general purpose or general use. There are AI, and specifically the AI hyperscale data centers. And then we have crypto mining and Bitcoin style data centers. Sometimes they call these pastures or farms to kind of cover up what they actually are, but they're still a type of data center. So, Ethan, are you familiar with these?
I am, at least in the general sense. I know that I've mostly interacted with with the regular web and cloud style because those are the ones you can actually rent a VPS from. And I've looked at the more personal size crypto mining ones before, just back when that was kind of a thing, and I was trying to figure out why I couldn't buy a GPU for my PC build I wanted to do back then, because that was the first time we had the GPU blackout, and it was impossible to buy anything. It was when Bitcoin really shot off. So There's I know that there are a lot. I know the crypto mining ones are really big over in Eastern Europe and around the Ukraine area where they have incredibly cheap electricity, because that's about the only place in the world that it's actually profitable to run them at a small scale. You have to really scale up to absurd levels before you finally start getting enough crypto mined to actually make up for the energy cost.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one of the things they have started putting. They don't have as many of those, but they have started putting some of those in the US in different areas. Like there's one out in Texas, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're trying to put one here in Alabama, one of these giant crypto mining facilities. And these things are they don't use water the same way AI data centers do, but they are very loud. They produce so much noise pollution that it can cause people to have like migraines that live nearby, and it can make animals sick because like just it's a constant noise bombardment. And there's supposed to be regulations, but this goes back to like you can't
Enforcement.
force federal. Yeah. So one of the things that I've done is I've wrote two bills to help address data centers. Those are by the time you see this episode, they may or may not actually have been released. I'm going to put them out as a press release to show what we can do. And one of the ways that we can help with enforcement is if you add stipulations for civil suits from citizens to be able to be brought. Because otherwise, if you don't have that, then you're just depending on the government to do what it's supposed to do. And they can choose not to.
As we've seen recently with them saying that, what was it, Project Mustang, I think it was called, is what they're doing to actually fast track the building of the different data centers and such.
I'm not sure about that one. I know there's a Project Marvel out in Bessemer. I'm not for. I don't remember
I meant
Project
for the
Mustang off the top
federal.
of my
I meant
head.
for the federal
Oh,
level, and I might be misremembering what they called it. It was something like that, though.
well, you're good. I can't keep track of the names they give stuff. Half the
Yeah,
time they name something the opposite of what it actually does.
I mean, of course, that's just how you get things pushed through. Or you put save the kids in there somehow,
Yep.
or
So
protect the
just
kids. Sorry,
it's
forget my
all of the
talking
things.
points.
So when you talk about regular web, I'll just go over these briefly and then we'll continue on. Regular web and cloud data centers, that's what the internet uses for like websites, emails, apps, cloud storage, all that kind of stuff. It's usually quieter, have a smaller footprint. It's still an industrial thing, and you don't necessarily want it next door to houses, but they're usually less of a problem.
That's why
They'll
you want them in
use,
industrial parks.
yeah. And that's my argument that like data centers should be in industrial parks anyway.
Which
But
they
like
should.
regular web data centers, they use power, but they're having like a regular predictable growth. They're not trying to shove them in and skip over a lot of regulations and everything right now.
Right. They
They
actually.
don't.
Sorry. Go ahead. I'll let you get. I'll let you
No,
get
it's
through
fine.
this.
It's okay. I was just saying they don't use as much water. They still have to do cooling, but it's
Mhm.
nowhere near the same because of how the hardware is different.
Except for the ones that Discord and YouTube operate out of, and Netflix. Those three use more
Mhm.
water and have higher cooling requirements than most AI ones do. They're right.
Okay.
Those the three that they have are the ones that are right up there with the crypto mining ones as far as energy usage.
I imagine those are probably like one of the hyperscaled ones, though, not the more standard sized ones we're used to.
Yes, that's because of just how much storage they need on site. And and also just Discord is really a big problem because it's not a very optimized program. I don't know if you've ever dug into it or anything, but it's a miracle that it works, and it's not surprising when it breaks. So it's the fact that it's been going as long as it has, and they have so much writing on it is amazing because it probably is. They probably could have written it in Python and been more efficient, which is impressive, honestly.
We'll just put that on your to do list.
Oh, I'm not touching it. I left Discord. I don't have. I haven't had one in 6 months.
Those are the big differences. You also have jobs. Usually those still have more jobs associated with them,
Yes.
but people maintain those more regularly. They're usually actually tied with real businesses and things
Mm-hmm.
like that when you have like the regular data centers. And that's for people, that's when you're normal web hosting, if you need a VPN, if you need VPS, those are the kinds of things that that does. So we talked about regular data centers. Now let's talk about AI hyperscale data centers a little bit and we'll draw some comparisons. So AI hyperscale data centers are these are massive. Like imagine something the size of 18 Walmart supercenters and like you kind of get an idea. So They train and they run big models. They use a lot of power. They have a huge water draw, like more than what any of the cooling that's needed. And if you go into it, we can make more efficient cooling mechanisms. And I think you were telling me before about one in Europe. Did you want to talk about that?
I'll just touch on it real quick. The EU has a lot stricter rules regarding the construction of these data centers. One, they do have to be in industrial areas, and two, the type of cooling that they use has to be a lot more efficient. It has to be one of the more efficient methods that we have. Like even their open loop systems are better engineered than the ones that we're throwing in. So that was all I had about that. I don't have the actual technical specifics here in front of me, so I don't want to try and dive into more details than I actually have on hand.
No, it's fine. It's something though that just to say that other places in the world are doing it better than us, and as an American, I kind of think that we should try to do things the best. Maybe
Uh, Especially
why
when it's
not?
our companies that are building data centers over there better than they're building it here. It's almost like they're specifically trying to do things the cheap way here, where they're supposed to be based out of.
This goes back into a different argument I make, but that corporations will only do what they are forced to do. Corporations are not people.
I think they're not people; they're sociopaths. Like if you try and treat them as a single entity and try and give them a psychological profile, it always ends up with a dark triad somewhere. So
I you said it, not me.
look, all I'm saying is that I'm just going to back it up with Google removed "Don't be evil" from their company motto and their modus operandi this past year. So they're okay with being evil now.
Well, speaking of companies that want to push data centers, so they're often they the AI hyperscale data centers usually have a lot less jobs than what they claim. And so that's a thing that we have to be aware of. They use a lot of water because they don't want to do the more efficient cooling methods here, because the more efficient cooling methods are more expensive to build, but they are better for the communities where the data centers are put. And this is like the Bessemer Project Marvel fight that's happening right now. And then some of the problems that Memphis has been having with XAI's data centers, because they run generators all the time to the point where it's causing pollution and smog in the city.
Yeah, well,
So
when you build an area that doesn't have the infrastructure for you, and you realize you are going to have to bootstrap your own infrastructure, and you go with the cheapest possible means of doing that, you're going to have issues.
yeah, if only there was better ways to do energy. We'll talk about that later. So then the last one I'll touch on is crypto mining and Bitcoin style data centers. They try to call these like pastures and farms and stuff like that to give them euphemisms. They don't require as much cooling, but they're very loud and they use a lot of electricity. And we touched on this before, but just to recap, that they are basically trying to turn electricity straight into digital coins.
Yeah,
The scam parts of it have not been regulated as well as they should have been in the US.
no, no, they
They,
haven't.
if you look at current administration people, there is a big push for more crypto, more everything so they can grift.
Yeah,
And I think that's
definitely,
ridiculous.
it is, and that's just where you have your big four currencies, then everything that's based off of them is usually a scam. And it's just like, I mean, the technology had promise there at the beginning. It was a very interesting idea, but as soon as they started mining it commercially with these big crypto mining data centers, then we started getting companies like Coinbase, and then the FTC started getting involved. It's just like it's all. I mean, you have to give more identification now to get a crypto wallet through something like Coinbase than you do to get a bank account. So, and then they monitor everything. They have a list of known wallets you're allowed to send to. If someone makes a wallet within like a day, you usually can't send any crypto to them for for at least a business week, and it's a whole thing because they got to make sure everybody's synced up with the database and all that. So, Monero XMR is about the only one still. But if anyone wants to operate in the US, you're not allowed to trade in Monero XMR because they can't trace that one. That's the one that's actually impossible to trace. All the others are very easy because it's publicly announced. So, again, I spent a little bit of time going down the rabbit hole in this one.
No, it's all good. I mean, what could you ever want to do with untraceable money? Definitely only legal stuff, I'm sure.
I mean, there's people out there trying to use silver and gold that you can't trace to buy grain, and to buy grain as such from different farm stores. Like the homesteading community is all about that.
I'm sure that's a subset. I'm sure that's not the bulk, though.
Well, yeah, of course it's a subset. How many people are going to be going out there with gold bullions trying to be like, here, I need 50 pounds of grain, please, and chip off how much of that gold I get back, please. And now you have the scales, and they do.
I'm going to move on to the next topic.
Yes, sorry to be this completely derail it there.
It's all good. So just a summary is that the data centers that most people are upset about are not the same kind that we've traditionally had, and that if we want to have a digital economy, we do have to have like the general use data centers. Those are important. They take less resources than the new AI, and they take a lot less electricity than like crypto does. So those also scale up at a reasonable rate, and we can kind of predict how much internet usage we're going to need. So those are like, I've seen numbers, some like 3 to 9% growth, instead of like, who knows what they're throwing at AI data centers.
I believe the numbers is something closer to 21.
On the AI or on the regular general?
No, on the AI side, they're trying to get us to really boost the production of them. They want to have a massive growth on there, which 21% sounds like a lot, or it doesn't sound like much. When you're talking about building, like you said, these massive construction sites, that's a lot of construction that has to go into just for that. I think
I might be wrong on this, but I think
might be wrong with the 21.
20. Also, so. If it's the 21% number, that sounds like 21% more data centers, but that's still those are not all made equal. So some of those are it could be like 50% more power and output usage needed than is the number might imply. So again, if you look at the Project Marvel, that's going to be like a 670 acre piece of land that they're building on.
Huge. Yeah. That's a lot of land to take up for it.
But I am gonna I have a little bit of a bone to pick about some of this, so if you'll humor me, I got a bit of a rant I want to get out.
That's what I'm here for. Go right ahead. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. Let's do it. I will not interrupt too until you say you're done with the rant.
You're all good. So those of you that know me, I'm a software engineer. That's literally what I got my master's in. And in 2024, I really started tracking what AI was doing to software industry, because that's the people who get hit first. Like when all of this started getting big, software engineers are the people that were feeling it first, because that's where the push is. And so by 2025, I was talking about this when I went places and talked to people. I mean, I've talked to Ethan about this. Probably everybody in my life is tired of hearing about it. But if you don't talk about things, people don't realize it's a problem. So the massive data centers that are being built are a symptom of this, but they're also going to be the start of new problems. Weakly regulated data centers are moving into our rural towns, and they're making them, maybe not here in Alabama yet, they want to, but where a lot of these poorly regulated data centers have been, they crush infrastructure and cause power bill spikes. So one of the reasons I'm running for office is this is one of the things that motivated me to run, is to make sure that AI data centers work for humans and not against humans, not for people. They should not be working against us. AI is here whether we like it or not, unfortunately. And in Alabama, at least, our legislators are just now talking about pieces of the problem. So we have SB270 and HB399. They made a few rules, but they're like still very weak and they're incomplete. So one of the things I've done is I have bills that will address big parts of the problem, and I have to do that in 2 different bills. But Data centers are coming into rural towns. They're going to destroy our environment. They're going to suck up the resources. And for people who don't know, they also can cause health problems in different ways. We talked about noise pollution earlier that can cause like neurological problems. Well, if they do generators, some of those generators are cause cancer because the generators are carcinogenic when they put out the fumes in the pollution. So that's going to just be put into the nearby areas. So it's going to completely change our job market too, the way that the companies are trying to force AI into jobs. I'm not saying we can ever use it, but we have to be smart about this. The way our kids are learning is also going to change. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get people in trouble, but I know a few teachers that pretty much know that when they get homework back from their kids, ChatGPT or some equivalent is doing the kids' homework for them. So we have to figure out how we can learn and teach in this new environment where there's this easy button to press and you technically do the job, but you never learn. And that's a big problem for learning in schools because where do you get educated? How do you get trained for a job? How do you be a productive member of society? How do you learn critical thinking skills? So people don't realize it, but we can put regulations around these things. I don't have the answers to all of this, but we can't trust the federal government to do it. The state government has the power to make these changes. So what I want to do is figure out how we can protect our jobs, protect our communities, and protect our future from all the harmful effects of AI. So we already talked about like the different types of data centers. The biggest ones I don't have the problem with isn't the general use ones. That's going to be the crypto. Those are bad. But the AI ones, and especially the AI hyperscaled ones, those have the biggest impact. So I showed my table earlier, and we talked about that. This goes back to the zoning policies. And in Alabama, we have a lot of rules that don't get implemented because there's not really any teeth to them. But a bigger problem is we don't have any rules about certain things. One of those is around unincorporated areas, and then how community, like the city zoning boards and councils, can actually sign NDAs with these companies. And so then they are legally not allowed to tell their constituents who they should answer to about the problem or about what's coming in. So, sorry.
Look into the what's the drama going on out in Taylor, Texas, with the data center going on out there. Have you heard anything about this?
No.
So Louis Rossman has been covering this a lot, and the 30-second version is a farmer left 80 acres of land to the city to be used as a park in a low minority centered part of town. He wanted a park to go there. He had a farm there for his life. His family didn't want to take care of the farm, so he sold it to the city for $10 with the verbal agreement this is going to be used for a park. The city later on down the line, instead of building a park, sold it to a data center that the mayor and several people on the city council used to work for. And the mayor, when they had a town hall meeting to address it, they did not have enough people there for a quorum, so no agreement could be made. Nothing could be done at the city council meeting. And the mayor himself left town and has bought property and sold his house in the town, and is serving remotely until the end of his term. Yeah, so he just up and left after selling the property to the data center he used to work for. I believe that's close to accurate there. I may have a few of those details at the end wrong, but Louis Rossman has been doing some really dedicated coverage to it. So definitely look into that if you just want an example for how our city councils are being bought out by these places and not telling you right about it.
Well, you can also look in Bessemer in Alabama, like Project Marvel, all that crap we talked about. There's even a whole documentary about this. I've talked about that before.
Didn't know that.
There's a documentary called Hyperscaled, and I talked about this in I think episode 1 or 2 of this podcast. I can put the links in the description. But
I'm just gonna look it up myself too. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the 670 acre one. But the NDAs were signed with their zoning commission, and none of this. I'll just kind of back up. So one of the things that I thought was suspicious is how some of this happens, that they can have these zoning commission people sign the NDAs. To me, the zoning commission people are supposed to be accountable to the public. So when you sign NDAs about what's going on, it at minimum seems like a conflict of interest. So that should be illegal if you're a public servant. And that's what I think politicians and anybody that's serving the public is supposed to be, a public servant or servant leader, if you want to look at it from a Christian aspect. I believe in your role, you have to have full transparency about what you do. So I don't like that in Alabama that you can put these industrial projects right beside neighborhoods and communities just because they're rural or they're labeled as unincorporated or whatever they want to call it. I think projects like this should have to exist in industrial parks. That's what we zone these for. But in Alabama, we don't have specific rules about data centers, or like they're not very good. Some people think zoning is a bad word, but in this case, I'm just saying using zoning is a tool to protect people. So you put things in industrial parks that make more sense because you can control what's around it better and you keep it away from residential areas. It's around other businesses, and industrial parks and even research parks are usually they're able to be scaled up better because they're there for industrial power usage, higher water input, high water output. So it's not just about land. There's another story about the data farms, and there's a crypto data center out in Texas that it generates so much power it makes people sick. So sometimes these places
it generates so much noise that makes people sick. Yeah,
they generate so much noise. Yes, thank you. So one of the problems, though, is when they know they're going to be inspected, they get a heads up. So they'll tone stuff down. They will make it quieter. So that place is supposed to have sound baffling. But even with the sound baffling, it's enough that people get sick and have migraines and different health events. Mm-hmm. But back to Alabama, if we look at Project Marvel, so just some numbers on this, and I'm going to do these off the top of my head, so they should be correct, though, because I've done some research on this. It's about a $14 to a $14.5 billion hyperscale data center. It was proposed by the Atlanta developers, Logistics Lands or TPA, something like that. I think it might be both. So the plans for it, like I said before, are 18 Walmart supersized center buildings that are about 4.5 million square feet, and it's going to be spread across roughly 670 acres of land. So it's supposed to be a data center, but as of the rezoning fight that they're having, which they still won't disclose which company that data center is going to be for, so it's probably going to be an AI data center. They claim that it wasn't decided, but most of these things they're specifically built and planned with somebody in mind. They just don't like to have it public until the last minute so that they don't get flack for it. So it's going to have a massive data farm in it, and it's going to use so much power. So I've looked at some numbers. The amount of power is a huge increase for what this area currently does, and it's not going to provide as many jobs as they're trying to claim. So it's not going to be a big benefit for the area, if it's going to be a benefit at all. One of the pitches is that it'll employ about 330 people permanently, and they claim it'll have an average salary of $100,000, and that it'll make 1,000 construction jobs while it's being built. The construction jobs part's probably true, but the permanent employee one is probably not. So if we look at Huntsville...
because the first thing they're going to do is they're going to get the bare minimum in there. Maybe they'll have that many at the start, but then as soon as they can, they're going to ship out half of them and replace them with twice as many visa holders and have them doing all the grunt work. That's just the MO for these places.
They don't even have to get visa holders for some of it, but if they do, that's a separate issue with how the visas can hold people hostages here because of how it's tied to corporations. But a lot of these things, they just don't take as many people to run as they used to, or as people think they do. So they'll promise one number using old numbers and then say, well, we're more efficient now. So I don't have exact numbers on this because you can't tell, like there's still NDAs around this. But let's just say if they had 330 people and they only did half. Well, anytime they say there's a certain grain of salt, anytime you say how many people are going to be employed, there's always a grain of salt that needs to be taken because we're trying to look at what it's going to do. But when they're giving those numbers, they're trying to sound good to investors and to zoning commissions. That's not a guarantee. So with the tax abatement, so a separate issue, tax abatements used to be 30 years. Now it's a 20-year tax abatement on big projects like this with the ability to add another 10 years. So if you know the right people, you'll still get your 30 years. But if you have this tax abatement and you are not holding up to the promises you made, I think it should be proportional. So if you employ 50% of the people and you got a tax abatement, then you should only get 50% of that tax abatement. So let's say you do 20%. It should be a proportional decrease based off of what you actually do so that you're held to your promises and that you don't just get tax write-offs without doing what you promised the community. So under Alabama's data center processing abatement path, the job floor is only about 20 permanent jobs at $40,000, 40,000 something. I forgot that number. Anyway, you only have to have about 20 permanent jobs, and the big investment tiers that have been in hundreds of millions or the order of that, that's where the big 30-year tax abatements were. So these places promise tax revenue, but tax abatements mean you don't have to pay taxes. So I don't know what people think they're going to get out of all that if they're not getting the jobs and they're not going to actually get tax revenue, because I don't know if these data centers are still going to be around in 30 years. If they are, then they're going to still be bringing in more stuff, and they will have already potentially done 30 years of damage. So
I mean,
people are
the
coming.
NSA is going to want them.
People are coming to Alabama anyway, even though we've got different things that try to adjust the tax abatement pathway. But Alabama has big tracts of land that are cheaper than a lot of other places. People want to come here because they feel like we don't regulate them. So they want to take advantage of that, and they want to come abuse our natural resources. And so people are still going to come in here, even if we don't give them tax incentives, because our land proportionately is cheaper than a lot of other places in the U.S. Now, to us, it may not feel like it because the land is priced for the Alabamian. But if somebody comes in from, say, another country, to them, it may feel cheaper. So they're going to buy huge tracts of land that might be hard for us to afford, but outside money can come in and have a stronger buying power. So
have you
Bessemer, sorry,
just real quick on this on the note of other countries coming in buying tracts of land, are you familiar with how much percentage of the Alabama National Forest, or not the National Forest, but the Alabama State Forest and Timber Forest are owned by China?
Probably a lot, and that's a different issue that I think that people from out of the country especially should have to pay a different tax rate than Alabamians because they can come in and hold a lot. I also know that I don't know the percentage, but I'm pretty sure there's a company from Germany that also owns a lot of our timberland.
Oh yeah, most of our timber in Alabama is owned by companies outside the United States. So if you're ever wondering why it is we have such a hard time getting cheap lumber anymore, it's because we don't own it, and all these wonderful trees are getting logged all the time is getting shipped out of the state and out of the country sometimes for cheap building materials instead of us being able to use it here. Because our legislation allows other countries just to come in and buy up all of our natural resources if they want it.
And that is a separate rant, but to summarize that, I think that much like colleges have in-state and out-of-state tuition, Alabama should have an in-state and out-of-state tax rate to promote Alabamians owning Alabama. And if it's non-Alabamians, then they have to contribute to us, especially because a lot of these corporations, how that they own these tracts of land and they get a specific tax rate, and it's usually rated as undeveloped, even though they're getting timber money from it. So they pay a lower tax rate than most Alabamians do on huge tracts of land.
And I'll even go so far as to say that y'all should look into just banning other countries from owning this land also, and keep it to United States corporations, let alone, still have the two-tier tax system, but have out-of-state and in-state taxes, and just not even allow out-of-country. But that's just my personal opinion on that one.
I mean, I'm in favor of stuff like that. I would know, again, it comes down to implementation, and I'd have to go through the code to make sure if we're, like, every time I write a bill, I have to look through Alabama's code, and I have to see what else has been passed to figure out where the interactions are. So it's just a lot to look up. I am not directionally opposed to that, because It's kind of crazy. Like, I may be wrong, but I know that there are other countries where you can't go buy land, and I think Mexico is one of them. As a U.S. citizen, at least it used to be that you could not go buy land in Mexico. So, yeah, that's my rant about the land usage a bit, since we brought that up too, but how that comes into effect. So that goes back to the Bessemer land, and technically it's an Atlanta company. I don't know the parent company, and I don't know if that originated from an outside place from the US, but it's at least an Atlanta company, so out of Alabama, that's coming in to buy this land in Alabama. And so it is November 2025 that the city council in Bessemer voted 5-2 to rezone all of that land into light industrial. And then they ruled that that can be used for the data centers. And this was over residents opposing this. Like, people came out to the city council meeting and nobody would liked it. So whereas in a lot of other areas, at least in the world, data centers get their own special classification because they use so much power or water. And at minimum, they usually get labeled as heavy industrial because they are very high resource usage. So
especially
if
especially
we,
electricity.
yeah, if we look at what the developer put out, so for the Project Marvel, we can see that they planned that their build would probably be around 1,200 megawatts. So just for people, numbers on this are hard. That's a lot of energy. That's been
Light.
described as on the order of about 90 times what Bessemer's residential load of power draw is
Yeah.
currently.
I
So
don't think
like,
we have any city in the state that draws that much, except for maybe Huntsville and Birmingham, our two
I
largest. I'm not even
I'm not even
sure.
sure if I'm not sure off the top of my head if Birmingham is. I remember the Bessemer one because like they're putting it in Bessemer, and so they're
Right.
going to draw 90 times more power than the Bessemer's residential people do. So if you look at 1,200 megawatts, that's something around 1/10 of all of Alabama Power's power generation, and
Yeah.
so
And how
this
much
is
of a
not necessarily.
percentage? How much of a percentage of the state does Alabama Power cover? Like at a rough estimate. I know
Oh,
you don't know that on top of
most
your head.
probably 75 or more percent. I know
Pretty
North
sure it's.
Alabama, we pull some TVA cooperative power,
Yep.
and it depends on if you judge it by population or by land, but I think it's going to be
Right.
close to that.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Was just Alabama Power. Pretty much, if you're south of the Tennessee Valley, Tennessee River Valley, you're Alabama Power. That's your two options here, really. So most of the state still is under Alabama Power, and they are not exactly well known for their reliability to keep power to these places. Uh, they use matchsticks mostly to hold the lines up and hope the tree limbs don't fall on it in the next 5 years. Kind of their management
So
strategy.
I might be a little off on some of those numbers because those were from estimates, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
go through, like, I don't have the time to go through every single thing they've put out line by line, but just looking at the big picture. But
Mm-hmm.
even if I'm off by a little bit, that's still the right order of magnitude ballpark, and that's a huge scale. So if we track to see what's been done in the past, then people are probably going to see their bills go up, even if they're using the same amount of power, because Alabama
Yep.
Power's probably going to struggle to keep up with that much demand. They're going to be bringing more unsustainable and harder to scale things back up, like more coal and gas power. And so that's another reason that I think we need to focus on more power production in Alabama that's easier to scale, like, and
Yeah.
non-destructive. Things like solar and nuclear are the big ones that we could do. Like, we already have, it's not in that area right there, but in Alabama, we have a nuclear power plant. We could
Mm-hmm.
do more nuclear power plants, and solar scales up basically better than anything else. Just
Especially
saying.
because you can build your solar power generation on the roof of the facility you're building on. Now you need
You
more than
can,
that. You need more than that footprint even to power a single plant. But if you're supplementing
yeah.
at least, it can cover a good percentage, like something between
No, I
20 and
agree.
30% just using the roof.
And especially like if they're building something that big and we can't stop them, then they should be required to generate as much or all of their power
Mm-hmm.
because they already have a ridiculous amount of land for it. So this is crazy to me because solar scales up. One reason it scales up so well is because you can do like a strip of solar, wire those all in, and it can be generating power while you still keep building a solar farm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that's a no-brainer to me on that one. So I'll go into
Neil,
so our I'm gonna do another episode with you, and we're gonna go into power more on that if that's
I
okay.
would. Oh, I'd love to do that, especially if you give me enough time to research into the sodium cell batteries that they're working on right now. I know China's made some big leaps on
Yep.
that, and I'd like to
So
research more on them because they seem to play with solar really well, and I want to dig into that more. So,
off the top of my head, there's also been some research into basically rusted iron batteries.
yes.
So that's an interesting thing. But if we go back to what the data centers, these big ones use, so the developer in Bessemer estimated that they would need about 2 million gallons of water per day. And the local utility company said they can't meet that without major infrastructure upgrades. So at that point, it's not even the money for the water, it's just that the water is not there. So when that data center
Just
is using,
sorry,
sorry,
just to make sure we're all understanding it properly. That's 20 million per day for
or
constant
2 million,
use.
yeah,
2
2
million
million
per
gallons per day.
sorry, yeah, 2 million per day for normal everyday use, not just the fill up stage at the beginning of the operations, right? That's just
Right.
their estimated
As
use that
far
they're
as I
going to
can
have every
tell,
day.
and so that much water does not exist for the current infrastructure. So when that happens, people won't even be able to get drinking water or be able to shower, things like that. If you look at other countries where the data centers pulled the water out, there was one that literally had to put salt water in their pipes from the ocean just to give people something. And that's
Mm-hmm.
terrible.
Yep.
So it's not clean. It pollutes the pipes. You can't drink salt water, but
Mm-hmm.
people needed something. So people tried to desalinate their own water at home just to not die. So all these data centers also have to have some kind of backup for if the power goes out. So what they're doing is they usually use diesel generators. So we'll talk about Project Marvel, and I've looked up some research on some other ones because, like I said, they don't want you to know what they're doing. So you have to fill in the gaps between what other places done to
Mm-hmm.
estimate what's going to happen. So in other hyperscale campuses that we don't have the like we are going to have X number of generators, we're going to put it somewhere between 300 and 500 based off what other places did. So the developer's own representative said they would have to test each one about 3 hours a month. So the areas around that are rightfully worried about the diesel exhaust, and it's classified as carcinogenic. And again, we talked about that earlier. Carcinogenic means that something can give you cancer, and diesel exhaust can give you cancer if you breathe and inhale it.
Right.
So if you take a middle number, like 400 generators, and you multiply that times the 3 hours, that's 1,200 generators a month. So
Mm-hmm.
I did the math on this, and that's at least one or two generators are always going to be running every hour of every day, even at night, for just the maintenance testing. That's not even counting an outage. So that's just to illustrate their claim about testing. That's not any kind of continuous duty permit that they would have. It's just
Right.
that's just how they would test.
So I actually can give a little bit of insight on how these generators are, if they're installed properly at least. There are definitely means you can do for the installation of these to one, protect the generator, and two, lower the noise, and three, have it run more cleanly because a lot of the carcinogens that come from that, it comes from fouled up pipes. That's where you see that nice black smoke that comes out of diesels that diesel is known for. If it's properly maintained and runs well, you don't get that nice puff of black smoke. And if it's in a properly insulated building too, or attached building, like I'm not going to say the plant that I am working at most of the time now, but they have a diesel generator on site that has to be run once a month, and half the time I can't tell it's going unless I'm about to go in there and check it, and then I'll notice that the little exhaust pipe has a little fan up because it is quiet. It is as quiet as the air conditioning unit that it's next to. If it's
I
in
mean,
a
I'm all
properly if it's in a properly insulated building, again, you have to install it properly. Now, they also have another generator that's just sitting out in the open. It's just there. You know when that thing's running. And so if they're just going to throw them out on the concrete pad, yeah, it's going to be horrible. But if they actually put them inside, like each one gets its little outbuilding with a backup fuel tank in there and proper insulation of the walls, it'll protect the generator longer, it'll run better, and it'll be quieter, and you won't even notice when it's running usually, unless you have all of them going at once and they're all fouled up and they're all just pumping out smoke. So it all comes down to implementation, like we've been talking about.
You remember what we talked about earlier?
Yep.
What are they going to build it the cheapest way or the minimum that they can get away with because we don't have good standards, or are they going to do it the so yes, you can do it. You can do diesel generators correctly. I am not assuming that they will.
I'm not either. I'm just I told you at the beginning I was going to try and play devil's advocate a little bit here, and I was just trying to point out that they're going to say, oh, but they're not that bad, it's okay. It's like, yeah, if you do it right, it's not, but they haven't done anything else right so far, so why should we expect they're going to at least put a generator in properly, you know?
So they've said they're going to have 18 buildings, so that definitely means they're not going to put each generator in its own little building.
Well, that'll count as their own separate building because it's attached to the siding of the building, so it's considered part of it. You know, it's separated from a wall from the inside still, but
so that's still, we'll estimate 400 diesel generators.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
That number's not going to change. Yeah.
I mean, it's somewhere between 300 and 500. I just picked the middle because it's
right.
The math on that's easier to work and it gives a more average case. So, like, that goes back to my zoning, though. Alabama doesn't require its data centers to be properly zoned. Data centers need to be zoned as either heavy industrial or their own special classification. So, and if we talk about water, I know that some of the water levels do get exaggerated. I'm aware of that. But a lot of this water and power was used during the initial training, and you don't know when they're going to pull peak draws. But a lot of these, like the 2 million gallons a day, are like expected usages. So on a peak day, it could be higher. We don't know. And they'll try to pretend, like, if you ever see people coming back at you for fussing about the water usage, they'll want to pick the lowest days and act like that's the average instead of the average day. Or in real life, you don't plan for average, though. You have to plan for the peak.
They also will throw at you too what their properly constructed high efficiency data centers are pulling as well, instead of what they're actually doing.
Build that.
That's what we'd like them to do.
So I'm not saying that all data centers are bad or all AI is bad. There are some aspects of AI that are good. Like it's helped with protein folding and it helped come up with potential drugs. So there are some use cases, but the more common kind of things I see is like when people do fake videos. That's not really like helping humanity out. There's not a lot of good use cases for making fake videos of, especially like politicians and stuff doing things. Like, I don't know how many times we need to see Trump as AI Jesus. So
yeah, that one was pretty distasteful. Especially when we already had the best meme at it up impossible, and he was when they just put his face over that wrestler and the CNN logo over the other guy. That was wonderful. That kicked off a whole legal firestorm. It was great.
I'm not trying to fight AI all the way. I just want things to be done right, and I'm trying to fight for cheaper power by making nuclear and solar power production. I want to fight for putting people in. I want to fight for people. I want protections that help regular people and not that are in favor of these massive corporations and these multinationals or just these ones that own most of the economy. And so I want less negative or no negative impacts from data centers and AI. So again, I don't think the answer is ban computers or ban AI completely. I don't think we can do that. We do need computers for a lot of stuff, but Alabama needs a real energy policy. I believe we need real siting standards. And like we talked about, we need enforced rules so that things work for us and not against us. So that's my rant.
Exactly. I'm all for it. So like you said, enforcement of the rules we already have is a great place to start, and getting the appropriate authorities whatever funding they need to do the enforcement would be a great place to start as well.
And I also think adding in the stuff about civil suits and all new regulations that we put in, because Alabama and federal government can choose to not honor things depending on who's in charge. But if you have a civil suit, like, that has to go to the court, and you can keep trying to raise that up till it gets in front of the Supreme Court in the worst case. And so then people know, oh, look, They're not doing it. This is the law on the books.
And talking about the consumer, because that will fall into the consumer protection levels at that point.
It should.
Right, and but never mind. I was about to bring up something well outside the scope of what we're talking about here, so never mind. I'm not going to even bring that up. It's a whole other rant.
Hey, there's a lot. All of this stuff. What a lot of people don't realize is all of this stuff connects, and you do have to understand some of that. One of the biggest problems is, ironically, that people fuss at me about, like, well, if you can't solve a whole problem, then it's not worth doing. And I'm like, I tell people, if we can fix 10% of a problem, there is 10% less problem to deal with. So the rest of it gets a little easier. Sometimes we have to do things in steps. Yeah.
Yeah, the all or nothing fallacy. No, it's an actual fallacy. It's just the argument that gets brought up a lot.
No, I know. And sometimes, though, you literally can't fix a problem. A lot of problems in real life exist because they are hard problems, and most hard problems can't be fixed in one go. A lot of things need staged intervals. Like, we didn't instantly invent the iPhone. We had a lot of technology that came before the iPhone. You can't just be like, I want this. And if this is a separate rant or issue, that we even had an iPhone-like device that tried to come out decades before the iPhone, and it didn't do well because the timing just wasn't right for it. So that's a different thing. I've done research on all kinds of stuff for this, and that came up because it's important to understand failure modes, and looking at, like, the biggest examples of company implosions is a good model for how we can avoid that with government. So I guess I could poke you with some questions. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah.
You are familiar with the Joe Wheeler area.
Yes.
I know I can't reveal sources on this, but I know for a fact that there are areas of interest to certain AI companies. I don't know. I can't say the names of which ones,
of course,
because I don't know the names, but I know that there have been interest in people buying up land along the Tennessee River to put data centers on. Could you talk through what kind of impact that would have?
Well, again, it all comes down to how they're going to implement it. If they do it properly, which let me start out with the best case scenario. Let me start out with the best case scenario. Then I'll go. Then I'm going to walk down the pathway of how it can fall apart. If they do it in the best way possible, they will have almost no impact because the areas along the river are largely unpopulated. The farmland there floods pretty frequently, so it's not even good farmland, especially in the rainy parts of the year. So a lot of it is relegated to unused and unharvestable forest. Mostly because, again, it's all swampland and everything, and there's just not any good trees there to harvest. So putting something there, I'm not 100% against it, but if they do it properly, all they're going to have is the proper water intake, and then it'll be evaporative cooling to actually cool things down there. Or if they have to have it, a water outfall for it, but what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to have a pond to stage that water in to let it reach ambient temperature before it's released into the river. Now, first off, there's your first failure point right there. There's gates that you have to keep closed on there before the temperature reaches the water it's supposed to. Now, the Tennessee River is very big, and contrary to popular belief, a temperature influx in a river system like that is not as damaging as it sounds like. It's not like an aquarium, where if you take a fish that's in room temperature water and put it in the aquarium too quickly and you dump it in there, it'll die from temperature shock. You may have a very tiny die-off of a few dozen fish in that immediate area, but you're not going to have anything terrible happen from it. The impacts of high temperature water is more long-term, where you're going to have a more likely chance of a localized algae bloom. So it's going to look real nasty there at it, mostly because
the algae blooms can end up taking out a lot of the population in areas too if it's the wrong kind of algae, can it?
Can, but if in the Tennessee River we don't have that problem because it flows too much.
Okay.
Stagnant water is really where you get that, and in the ocean where you have the red tides, that comes from a specific type of algae that exists in salt water that can take up a ton of nitrogen very quickly. And the industrial agriculture runoff in the areas along the coast is really what causes the red tides to happen, because it's just so much more nutrients in that water than there used to be. So we have those big blooms when the temperature gets up. There's all this nitrogen free floating there, and then it just blows up. And it really comes from a combination of the toxins produced by the algae as it decays, and also the lack of oxygen. The lack of oxygen is really the biggest thing. So nighttime is where that happens. But with the Tennessee River, there's so much water flowing through there. Unless we had a major reduction in flow and a excessive drought, we're probably not going to see anything happen from that.
And that
And so
assumes they're
long
not
as
pumping it back into like local streams that feed into it, and they're putting it directly back into it.
Right. Well, if they're there at the river, or if they're there building next to the river, anyways, it would take more work to reroute it upstream somewhere and then have it flow back down past their property. Although that would help balance the temperatures better that way, but you would have more of an impact on the local creeks, and that would just be regulatory hurdles they would have to jump through. So really, that wouldn't happen. And this is, again, I don't
Okay, so
fully understand.
go
how
through
they
the
would implement
regular case then. Go through that regular case of what you would expect in Alabama.
Well, for the regular, that would be the ideal scenario there. That's what's supposed to happen by how it is, if they're even allowed to do the direct water intake and water outfall system like that. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into the regulations
I think
as far
on
as setting up cooling systems.
so in Alabama, I believe if you're on the river, you can pull in 100,000 gallons a day, and
It's
without
supplemental to your
like
coolant.
yeah.
And that little bit of water there, I know 100,000 gallons sounds like a lot, but as it passes through the system, it's going to heat up. But as it's flowing out, it's cooling down just as quickly. So it's going to reach a closer to ambient temperature than you'd think it would, especially with that little bit of water. And in all likelihood, it's not going to go out it's not going to go back out into the river that way, because it gets mixed in with the rest of the water if it's supplemental. So even that shouldn't be an issue, really. Again, if they're
But let's say
keeping it separated properly.
let's say that the facility needs 100 million gallons, not 100 minutes, 1 million gallons of water. We'll go a little smaller than the hyperscaled one in Bessemer.
Right.
And so that would be up to 10%.
I mean, at that point, then we're at the point where no city in Alabama can actually, no municipal water system can actually supply them water. So that's going to be a special case. I don't know how they're going to handle that. The temptation, obviously, would be to have that river intake, just to just flow the water right in. But I don't see them being allowed to actually do that. There's a lot of focus on the Tennessee River and keeping that clean now, especially with a lot of river projects looking at it. And some companies in the Decatur area have fumbled the ball pretty bad on dumping pollutants directly into the river. Now, they are manufacturers that deal with these things, and I will give data centers this credit too. They really don't deal with that much hazardous waste compared to the others. It's mostly electronics and electronic scrap, and what they use when they're actually building the facility. After that, you're not really going to be having, you're not going to have industrial chemicals like industrial solvents or anything coming out of there, except for when they're cleaning the place or repainting, or unless they have a major fire, and then your fire suppressants are going to be a problem. But that they obviously we're going to have bigger issues if the place catches on fire. So,
So our best case is you put it somewhere that's not really desired. There's not already a ton of wildlife in the area, and they do everything by the book.
That is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is they don't build anything up to code, and the place collapses in on itself or slides into the river after a few years, and then all these electronics are being dumped in.
So what's the average case?
I mean, the average would be that talking hypotheticals here, the average case would be they build everything up to code properly, everything's running fine, but for whatever reason they start, if they do have, and here's where my lack of knowledge about how most of these centers actually operate comes in. The worst, really the biggest thing you're going to have to worry about is going to be your generators. They're going to have a lot of your oil products. They're going to have a lot of your fuels. They're going to have the oils and everything for their maintenance and all that on site. If they have their hazardous waste storage next to the river, that could potentially leak. But again, so long as that stuff is kept up to snuff, you're not going to have an issue out of it. So I'm struggling to think of a way where this is going to be bad environmentally, aside from the fact that it is just a desert of no available resources for animals to use. And
so
your roadways and such, it's just again, we're not really worried about too much here, especially with the even the noise pollution is going to be dampened by the trees they're going to have to build around because Alabama is covered in trees, and if they build it away from where people are living at, you're going to have a natural sound suppression there also,
So now let's
which could
pull
help.
that and we put it, let's say, next to a city with no zoning standards.
Right.
Still close to the river, so they
Yeah.
can pull water from the river if they want, but they're
If
still
they're
not going to
allowed
pull
to, at
enough.
least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh huh.
If the, so let's put it next to, let's say, my city. I live in Trinity. Let's say they want to
Mm-hmm.
put it right here, and they're going to pull power draw, they're going to pull water, all that from here.
I mean, they'd have to work with Joe Wheeler Electric Co-op if they could even tie into it. Hopefully, they could tie into Browns Ferry with the nuclear power plant there and draw from that. But that's a toss-up, really, because I mean, even Decatur has their own. Decatur Trinity has their own little power generation
Mm.
plant there, but that's natural gas, so it's still a fossil fuel, but on the better side. We do have that nice new solar facility going in though, and they're ramping
Which
up
I
production.
think that only right now it's only around like 3% of the power, which is still
Yeah,
good. It's been built, but the TVA cooperative laws are kind of funky. They can't sell
yeah,
it directly to Joe Wheeler. They have to sell their power back to TVA, and then TVA
yep.
sells it back to Joe Wheeler.
Which is why we haven't seen that 3%, 3 or 4% power cost drop yet. So, I don't think we're ever going to see that much of a drop from it, but it'd be nice to keep it stable at least.
Yeah,
Anyways, there's
I
a
think that did help stabilize a little bit compared to a few other areas, but like it's hard to
yeah,
it's hard to point to 3% and be like woo, but like over time that is beneficial.
exactly. And so the worst case we see on that would be, well, suddenly our nice little benefit from these from the power we have here to kind of keep our prices stable goes away. Uh, and then we start having the same fluctuations that everybody in Alabama has in the summer, where we're instead of going up $20 to $50 for the month of July and August, we're going up $200 or $300 instead of that because we don't have that nice cheap electricity anymore. Because, like you said, they're out there chasing the cheapest electricity.
Well,
I
they're
think
going to
that's going
pull
to be
it from in winter too. Winter is actually, I think, for a lot of people, because a lot of homes don't have as good of insulation. So, like, winter power is actually more expensive for some people than even the AC during the
yeah,
summer.
definitely,
And
especially
that,
when that cold snap we had because if you're not familiar with how the central air units we have commonly around the U.S. or work, the heating elements they have in there is less efficient than the cooling elements. So it costs more energy to heat up the air going back in the house that's being recirculated than it does to cool down the air. At least
and that goes back
at
to
least
like
as
people
far as
not having
electricity
heat
cost.
pumps. And this usually
Right.
strip. I think it's specifically like heating elements because it just
Mm-hmm.
runs. It basically acts like an old light bulb. It heats up a coil, and
Mm-hmm.
the coil gets hot, and then air blows across that. Whereas heat pumps basically act like an air conditioner in reverse.
Right, and well, it's still the heat pump works only to a point with the cold temperatures we had this past
Hmm.
time. I thankfully the central heating unit here is fancy enough. I can pull up a graph to show when it actually kicks on the heating elements. Once it gets down below, I think about 28 degrees outside, the heating elements kick in to help with the heat pump because it's not able to keep up with it otherwise. So now they're not on all the time, and it only kicks on at a certain point, or for a little bit of time until the air heats up enough for the heat pump to work properly again. But it's just it all depends on the model you have at that point. But so yeah, we are in a weird spot where we get high heating costs and high cooling costs. So several months of the year we have a nice average easy cost, then we get one or two there in a row that really hit you hard. So it averages out that pretty
So,
cheap.
we still our bills are on average some of the highest in the nation, even though our rates aren't necessarily
Really?
in Alabama. Yeah,
Well,
some of
that's
that's
Alabama
down to
power for
Alabama.
you.
I was gonna say some of it's Alabama power. That's a good chunk of it.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is because of our climate. Like it just gets so hot here, and like
Mm-hmm.
it's humid, and humid
Yeah.
air has more struggles to deal with than dry air.
Yeah, we don't get to use any swamp coolers or heating. We have the humidity to deal with in the house, so not only does our central heating have to deal with cooling down the air, it has to dehumidify the air as part of that process. So the evaporation system on those units has to be really running well to actually work properly. Because otherwise, it'll just kick off early because suddenly the water pan's filled up and it's not draining all the way quickly. So,
And so this
but
goes into
anyways,
why do they want to put stuff here because land's cheap, but then it's also really hot here too. So during the summer,
exactly.
I suspect water and power draws are going to be even higher if
Yes,
they
and
put
that would
data
be a
centers
safe
out
assumption.
here.
that would be a safe assessment for it, because and then they're also going to have to deal with the humidity, because best I remember, electronics don't deal with humidity too well. They don't like wet stuff.
So
So
I'll kind of, if it's okay with you, I'll kind of
yeah,
shift to our dessert. So
okay.
we have a former coach from Auburn who thinks that the only reason that you can dislike data centers is because of Chinese propaganda.
Hmm.
And I would like to ask you, do you think there are other reasons to be wary of data centers?
Well, let me begin by saying I'm disappointed in Coach Tuberville for reading the New York Post and getting all of his news from there, because apparently that's where this rumor originated at. I had never heard this before, but they published something a few weeks back where that was a claim that they made, and had nothing substantiating it. That no proof of their claims or anything like that. They just said it, and I guess he clung on to it, or one of his aides found it and he ran with it or something. So, I'm a little disappointed there. He's turned to the Post, but, what can you do?
I mean, I'm not sure if he actually reads it. I think it's more
Oh, I'm sure he
likely
got a
somebody
summary.
just told him what
Yes.
about it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's just a summary, and what I wanted to
We
say
know
might be counted as defamation, so I'm not going to say it. So, again, I brought
I
up
clipped this part of.
I brought up the 14%, the 40% increase on the tuition. So, if you look up just look up the drama around Cam Newton when he was brought onto Auburn and everything that happened with that, and yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Just his involvement with bringing Cam Newton into the team and what happened after that one. So back to the original question, though. I don't understand why people would think only China is involved in this. I know it's a popular conservative talking point to bring up the Chinese or the Russians whenever we have something unpopular going on and just blame them for it. Blame them for the reason people don't like something. It's sorry, I guess the Chinese is more the conservative side, but the Russians get blamed as more of a liberal talking point. It's kind of we got a nice little duopoly there. We blame somebody
And we,
else
we
for
do
people
know
not
that
liking stuff.
they both do disinformation campaigns here in
Sure,
America.
and we have
But
people out in
we do
California
that
being
too.
arrested. Yeah, but we
I
have
mean
also people out in
I mean
California being
crap.
arrested
America
for.
does disinformation campaigns.
I think we wrote the playbook on it. The CIA and the KGB
Yeah.
kind of work together on how we can mess up other countries better. So we're not innocent in this. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that to say that that's the only reasons behind it is kind of wild. And because again, I'm just going to bring up the what's going on in Tyler, Texas, and Lewis Rossman's coverage of that. What's going on? That's just horrible what they're doing out there. Their whole argument too is like, oh well, this is 100% legal for us to do it this way. Legal doesn't mean moral. Those are two different things, and you can clearly when the laws were written, they didn't have in mind that any city council will be evil enough to take a donated piece of land designated for a park on a handshake agreement and turn around and sell it to an industrial site in the place where a park was supposed to be, because that was probably unconscionable when that law was written. Probably didn't even know what a data center was either, so had no idea
Probably
of
I'd have to look.
yeah.
But so that was just kind of the dessert. We can
Yeah.
kind of wrap up on this and I'm going to have you on with the next episode and we'll talk about a lot of the energy stuff and how that ties in with conservation. You ready? You good for that?
I am. I think I'm a little bit more qualified for that one too. I don't know my building codes and how most of these things are constructed as well as I do about the biodiversity in the state. So
Well, a lot of the problem is a lot of people that do know about that are on NDAs with the data center companies.
NDAs, and again, the enforcement just isn't there to hold them to
Yep.
account. So
So, yep. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us, and we'll kind of wrap this up. Have a good
all
one.
right, we'll see
Check
you.
for any links we mentioned in the description. Bye.
Have a good one.